It was a warm Sunday afternoon in Clearwater, Florida, and the backyard of a modest single-story home had been transformed into a picture-perfect scene. Pink and blue balloons floated in clusters around a wooden fence. A white canopy shaded a dessert table filled with cupcakes, cookies, and a small cake topped with a question mark. Friends, family, and neighbors gathered with smiles and laughter, their phones ready to capture the big moment. At the center of it all stood 27-year-old Sarah Mitchell, her face glowing with excitement and nerves, and her boyfriend, Devin Carter, standing closely beside her, one arm around her shoulder. The couple had been dating for just over a year. Sarah, a preschool teacher, had met Devin, a part-time mechanic, at a local auto shop when her car broke down. Things moved quickly. Within a few months they moved in together, and by winter, Sarah was pregnant. She had always dreamed of becoming a mother, and while the pregnancy wasn't planned, she embraced it with joy. Devin, though more reserved, appeared to support her, at least in public. That day, everything seemed perfect. Laughter echoed through the backyard as guests sipped lemonade and snacked on finger foods. When the time finally came for the reveal, Sarah and Devin held a large black balloon between them. With everyone counting down, they popped it, releasing a burst of pink confetti into the air. Cheers erupted. It was a girl. Sarah covered her mouth in happy disbelief. A few people wiped away tears. Devin smiled and hugged her. But those close by noticed his reaction was muted, almost distracted. Still, no one thought much of it. The celebration carried on for another hour before guests began leaving, congratulating the couple as they said their goodbyes. What no one realized was that this would be the last time anyone saw Sarah Mitchell alive. The next morning, Sarah didn't show up for her prenatal appointment. Her OB/GYN's office called several times but got no response. This wasn't like Sarah. She never missed appointments and always called ahead if something changed. When her mother, Linda, couldn't reach her by phone either, a sense of unease began to grow. Linda drove to Sarah's apartment complex that afternoon, knocking on the door repeatedly. No answer. She tried Devin, who said Sarah had left the apartment early that morning after an argument, saying she needed some space. But the explanation didn't sit right. Sarah had never left without telling someone, especially not now, not while pregnant. Devin insisted he didn't know where she went. He said she'd probably be back by nightfall. Nightfall came and went. Sarah didn't return. The next day, Linda filed a missing person report. Police arrived at Sarah's apartment to investigate. The unit was tidy. Nothing appeared broken or out of place. But several personal items raised alarms. Sarah's purse, her phone, and her prenatal vitamins were still in the apartment. Her car, a 2018 blue Honda Civic, was gone. The last known use of her phone had been at 8:13 a.m. the morning after. The gender reveal. After that, it went dark. At first, detectives treated the case as a routine disappearance. There was no immediate evidence of foul play. Devin told them Sarah had walked out with her car keys and a small overnight bag, claiming she just needed a break. He didn't seem overly concerned, but when asked for details, what she was wearing, what direction she drove, who she might have gone to see, his answers were vague. He couldn't remember if she took her phone charger. He wasn't sure if she was heading to her mother's or a friend's. He hadn't tried to contact her since she left. It didn't add up. Detectives reached out to Sarah's friends and co-workers. All of them described her as responsible, kind, and excited about her pregnancy. None believed she would walk away from her life voluntarily. Her best friend, Natalie, said Sarah had been a little stressed recently, but nothing alarming. She hadn't, mentioned any major problems with Devon, though she had admitted feeling unsure about their future together. When police began checking surveillance footage from nearby traffic cameras and businesses, they found nothing helpful. Sarah's car wasn't captured anywhere in town. There were no transactions on her bank cards. Her social media accounts remained untouched. In today's digital age, when even a short break from technology is rare, the complete silence was deafening. A few flyers went up around town. Her picture, smiling, brown hair down, wearing a pastel dress, was shared hundreds of times on social media. Missing, Sarah Mitchell, last seen on Sunday, May 3rd. People who had attended the gender reveal began to talk, to replay the event in their minds, wondering if there had been any signs. A few remembered that Devon didn't seem as happy as Sarah. One guest mentioned seeing him leave the party early and return 10 minutes later. No one had thought much of it at the time. As the days turned into a week, the local news picked up the story. A pregnant woman vanishing without a trace just after revealing she was having a daughter. It was the kind of mystery that stirred public interest. Volunteers began organizing small search parties. They scoured local parks, hiking trails, wooded areas, and back roads. But there was no sign of Sarah, no sign of her car, and no clue as to where she had gone. What started as a joyful celebration had quickly become a haunting mystery. The pink confetti still stuck to a few blades of grass in her mother's backyard, a cruel reminder of what was supposed to be a happy beginning. And as the search continued, one question began to rise above all others. If Sarah didn't leave on her own, then who made her disappear? As the second week of Sarah Mitchell's disappearance passed, the sense of unease that had quietly gripped her family turned into a consuming dread. What started as hope that she may have just needed a break quickly faded. Her phone remained off. Her car was still missing. There were no sightings, no activity on her bank cards, and no messages sent to anyone. For a woman who was 7 months pregnant and deeply involved in preparing for her baby's arrival, silence wasn't just strange. It was terrifying. Detectives began re-examining the people closest to her, starting with Devon Carter. On the surface, he appeared cooperative. He attended the initial interviews, answered questions without resistance, and repeated his claim that Sarah had left after a disagreement. He described it as minor, saying she was overwhelmed and needed space. But investigators quickly noted that while Devon seemed calm, he lacked the urgency and concern usually seen in cases involving missing loved ones. They started looking deeper into Devon's background. What they found was unsettling. 2 years prior, Devon had been arrested in Georgia for a domestic disturbance involving a former girlfriend. The case never made it to trial, and the charges were dropped after the alleged victim refused to cooperate. Still, it raised red flags. Police also discovered he'd been fired from his job at the auto shop 3 months earlier, reportedly after a series of angry outbursts toward co-workers. He hadn't been employed since. Sarah had never mentioned these incidents to her family. In fact, she rarely spoke about problems in her relationship. But as detectives interviewed her friends and co-workers, a pattern began to emerge. One colleague, who worked closely with Sarah at the preschool, revealed that Sarah had recently confided in her about growing tensions at home. She'd described Devon as increasingly moody and withdrawn. He was stressed about money, angry about the pregnancy, and sometimes snapped over small things. Sarah had even said she was thinking about moving in with her mother for a while, but was worried how Devon would react. Her best friend, Natalie, provided even more insight. Just a week before the gender reveal, Sarah had shown up at her apartment, in tears. She claimed Devin had accused her of flirting with a mutual friend at a grocery store. She had denied it, but Devin grew so angry that he punched a hole in the bedroom wall. It wasn't the first time he had lost control, Sarah admitted, but it was the first time she feared what might happen next. When Natalie asked why she stayed, Sarah's answer was simple. She didn't want her daughter growing up without a father. She hoped things would get better. Armed with this information, detectives pressed Devin again. This time, he was less accommodating. He claimed the past incidents were blown out of proportion and said Sarah was emotional because of her pregnancy. He maintained that she had packed a bag and left on her own. When asked why he hadn't reported her missing or made more effort to contact her, Devin shrugged. She said she'd be back, he told them. His behavior was now drawing serious suspicion. Searches of the apartment yielded little, but there were details that didn't quite fit. The overnight bag Devin claimed Sarah took was still in the closet. Her phone, found on the kitchen counter, hadn't been charged. Detectives believed that if she truly planned to leave for a few days, she would have taken both. The idea that she simply walked out and disappeared no longer made sense. Neighbors were questioned. One recalled seeing Sarah and Devin arguing in the parking lot the night after the party. Another said they heard loud thuds coming from the apartment early Monday morning. None of these observations were enough to confirm anything, but the timeline was starting to feel off. It was becoming increasingly clear that whatever happened to Sarah likely didn't involve a voluntary exit. In the midst of the investigation, something unexpected happened. Devin stopped responding. He ignored calls from detectives, canceled a follow-up interview, and told his attorney he didn't want to answer any more questions. He claimed he had nothing more to add. Then, he deleted all of his social media accounts. Friends noticed he had become reclusive, barely seen outside the apartment. His car, once parked in the same spot every day, was now missing for long stretches of time. Detectives requested a search warrant for Devin's vehicle, but it was nowhere to be found. According to surveillance footage, it had last been seen, leaving the complex early on the same Monday morning that Sarah vanished. After that, there were no records of it returning. Meanwhile, Sarah's family grew more desperate. Her mother went on local news, pleading for answers, saying her daughter would never abandon her unborn child. Volunteers ramped up their search efforts, placing flyers in nearby counties, posting updates on missing person forums, and organizing more search parties. But the longer she remained missing, the more difficult it became to keep hope alive. Investigators began to believe that they weren't searching for a missing person. They were building a homicide case. All signs pointed in one direction, but with no body, no crime scene, and no direct evidence, the case remained officially classified as a disappearance. The pressure to find something, anything that could break it open, was growing. Then, a phone call from a used car lot over 100 miles away changed everything. A man had arrived in Sarah's missing car, trying to trade it in. But the man wasn't Devin, and suddenly the case shifted from a silent mystery to something far darker. The phone call came on a Tuesday morning from a used car dealership in Ocala, a quiet city over 120 miles north of Clearwater. The manager, Todd Gleason, reported that a man had shown up the day before attempting to trade in a 2018 blue Honda Civic. Something about the visit didn't sit right with him. The man seemed uneasy, rushed, and evasive when asked for paperwork. When Todd ran the VIN through the system, it pinged as connected to a missing persons report. He didn't let on. Instead, he told the man he'd need more time to assess the car's trade-in value and asked him to return the next day. The moment the man left the lot, Todd called the Clearwater Police Department. When detectives received the call, everything changed. Sarah Mitchell's car had seemingly vanished with her, and now a complete stranger was in possession of it. Within hours, a team arrived in Ocala. The dealership was cooperative. Surveillance footage from the lot showed a thin man in his early 30s, wearing a baseball cap and dark hoodie, driving Sarah's car onto the lot. He parked, got out confidently, and entered the office, staying for just under 15 minutes. His license plate had been removed, and the vehicle looked recently cleaned. Too clean. The interior had been detailed, the trunk freshly vacuumed, and a strong chemical smell lingered. It was clear someone had tried to wipe away any trace of the past. The car was impounded, and forensic teams went to work. They dusted for prints, collected fibers, and ran luminol over every surface. They found faint traces of blood beneath the rear floor mat, not visible to the naked eye, but unmistakable under the chemical glow. Preliminary testing suggested the blood was human. A sample was rushed for DNA comparison. Meanwhile, detectives traced the man in the footage. He had used a fake name and a disconnected phone number when he filled out paperwork, but he had made a critical error. He left behind a copy of his old driver's license when asked for ID. His real name was Marcus Bell, a 34-year-old from Gainesville with a lengthy criminal record that included car theft, burglary, and drug possession. Police put out a statewide alert for his arrest. 2 days later, Marcus was found sleeping in a motel on the outskirts of Ocala. He was arrested without resistance and brought in for questioning. At first, he claimed he bought the Honda Civic from a stranger in a bar parking lot for $500 cash. He said he didn't know the woman it belonged to or that she was missing. He insisted he was just trying to make a quick buck. Detectives weren't convinced. They pressed harder, and when confronted with the DNA results, proving the blood found in the car belonged to Sarah Mitchell, his story began to crack. Marcus changed his tune. He claimed he was doing a favor for someone named Devin Carter. According to him, Devin had asked him to get rid of a car in exchange for money and drugs. Marcus said he had no idea it was linked to a missing woman until he saw news reports. Detectives noted that Marcus had no clear reason to lie about knowing Devin. They hadn't released that connection publicly. This statement confirmed what police had suspected all along. Devin wasn't just a concerned boyfriend. He was involved. With this revelation, detectives refocused their efforts on Devin Carter. They obtained a second warrant, this time for his phone records, digital history, and bank transactions. The data painted a disturbing picture. Devin's phone had been turned off for several hours on the morning Sarah disappeared, but the location history leading up to that moment revealed that he had driven to a wooded area just outside Clearwater. He stayed there for nearly 2 hours before returning home. That area had not yet been searched. Even more damning, just 3 days after Sarah vanished, Devin had withdrawn a large sum of money, over $2,000, from a savings account she didn't know he had. There were also text messages to an unknown number in the days following her disappearance, containing phrases like, "It's done," and "Make sure no one sees you." When the number was traced, it was linked to a burner phone later found in Marcus Bell's motel room. But despite all the mounting evidence, there was still no sign of Sarah's body. Detectives believed they were close to charging Devin with her murder, but without her remains, the case was vulnerable. Prosecutors advised caution. Circumstantial evidence was strong, but a conviction without a body would be difficult. Public pressure was rising. Sarah's family held vigils. News outlets picked up the story nationwide. The image of the smiling, Young woman holding pink confetti at her gender reveal became a haunting symbol of a life cut short. Then, in a dramatic turn, Marcus offered a deal. Through his lawyer, he said he would lead police to Sarah's remains in exchange for a reduced sentence. Detectives had no choice but to agree. The following morning, Marcus, flanked by officers, was escorted to a remote stretch of woodland near the location Devon's phone had last pinged. Beneath a shallow grave covered in brush and loose dirt, they found her. The search was over, but the story was far from finished. What really happened that night, and why, was only beginning to unravel. The shallow grave was hidden under a cluster of pine trees, barely noticeable from the dirt trail that snaked through the woods. A stray animal had disturbed the soil, revealing the edge of a white blanket. Forensics teams worked carefully, unearthing the remains with gloved hands and precision tools. There, beneath the earth, lay the decomposed body of Sarah Mitchell. She was still dressed in the same pastel pink blouse she had worn at her gender reveal party, her hands gently placed over her swollen abdomen. The remains of a small sonogram picture were folded in the pocket of her jeans, a chilling reminder of the life she had carried. The discovery triggered a whirlwind of activity. News vans lined the outskirts of the wooded area. Helicopters hovered overhead. Police officers blocked off access as the medical examiner's team carefully transported her remains to the coroner's office. A forensic autopsy revealed signs of blunt force trauma to the head and neck, with injuries indicating she had been struck multiple times. There were also signs of strangulation and bruising on her wrists, suggesting she had been restrained before her death. Most haunting of all, her unborn daughter did not survive. Detectives returned to Devon Carter's apartment immediately. This time, they had a warrant for his arrest. He didn't resist. Calm and expressionless, Devon was handcuffed and led out of the building as a small group of neighbors watched in stunned silence. He was charged with second-degree murder, abuse of a corpse, and tampering with evidence. Later, after the autopsy, confirmed the death of Sarah's unborn child. An additional charge of feticide was added. In the hours following his arrest, Devon said nothing. Not during transport, not during booking, and not during the first round of questioning. He sat in the interrogation room, eyes fixed on the table, his body language unreadable. But investigators had enough now to build a timeline. With Marcus, Belle's confession, the digital evidence, and the recovery of Sarah's body, they finally understood what had happened. After the gender reveal party, Sarah and Devon returned home. According to phone records and surveillance footage, the argument began shortly after midnight. Neighbors heard shouting, and one reported the sound of something heavy being dragged. Investigators believe that Devon snapped, overwhelmed by the stress of impending fatherhood, his financial troubles, and his belief that Sarah was planning to leave him. The final trigger may have been her threat to move out, taking their daughter with her. Sometime before dawn, Devon killed her inside their apartment. The blood evidence found in the trunk of her car matched the blood splatter discovered under the living room rug and along the hallway baseboards. After cleaning the scene, he wrapped her body in a blanket and placed it in the trunk. By 6 a.m., Devon had driven to the woods, dug a shallow grave and buried her. When he returned, he disposed of her phone and began erasing her presence from their home. Her prenatal vitamins, ultrasound photos, and baby clothes were bagged and tossed in a nearby dumpster. He told friends and family that Sarah had left after a disagreement. In the following days, he contacted Marcus, a former acquaintance from high school with a history of petty crime. Devon offered him money and drugs to dispose of the car, an attempt to sever the last physical link between himself and the crime. But it was his digital trail that betrayed him. Phone pings, deleted messages, and financial transactions painted a clearer picture than he ever could have anticipated. And when Marcus turned him in to save himself, the story began to collapse. As the trial approached, prosecutors prepared a compelling case. Devon's defense team floated the idea of a plea deal, but Sarah's family refused. They wanted justice, not compromise. In court, the evidence was laid out with brutal clarity. The timeline, the forensic findings, the financial motive, and Marcus's testimony. The prosecution painted Devon as a man who was emotionally unstable and possessive, someone who saw Sarah not as a partner, but as a possession slipping through his fingers. The most powerful moment came when Sarah's mother took the stand. She held up the sonogram photo found in Sarah's pocket and described the excitement her daughter had felt in those final weeks. Her voice trembled as she recalled Sarah practicing how to hold a newborn, buying tiny pink shoes, and planning nursery colors. She spoke of her daughter's hope, her dreams, and how all of it was stolen in one violent, senseless act. The jury took less than a day to reach their verdict. Devon Carter was found guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The courtroom was silent as the sentence was read. Sarah's family sat in the front row, holding hands tightly, tears streaming down their faces. In a quiet voice, her father said the words they had all been waiting to hear. Now she can rest. But the weight of her loss lingered. The community that had once celebrated new life now mourned two that had never gotten a chance to flourish. Her story became a symbol, a reminder of how quickly love can turn to control, and how ignoring the early signs of danger can lead to irreversible tragedy. Even in death, Sarah Mitchell left behind a voice, one that spoke through every press conference, every vigil, every poster that read, "Bring Sarah home." Her story was no longer just a true crime, it was a warning. And for many, that voice would never be forgotten. After the trial ended and Devon Carter was sentenced, Clearwater began to slowly return to normal. But for those closest to Sarah Mitchell, life would never be the same. Her name remained etched into every corner of the town. From the posters still clinging to light poles to the mural that students painted outside her former high school, her memory had become part of the community's soul. Yet behind the public mourning lay a quiet, aching grief that no verdict could fully heal. Sarah's parents, Linda and Charles, were left with the unbearable task of collecting their daughter's belongings. Her apartment had been sealed for months during the investigation, and when they stepped inside, everything felt frozen in time. The pink and white decorations from the gender reveal were still scattered across the living room, untouched. Baby shoes sat by the door, and a crib, half assembled, leaned against the wall in the spare room. Linda broke down when she found Sarah's pregnancy journal, a small spiral-bound notebook filled with hopes, names, and ultrasound dates. It was a cruel reminder of the life that had been waiting just weeks away. They packed everything slowly, piece by piece. Some items were donated, others stored in their attic where Sarah's childhood toys once were. But nothing was thrown away. Each object carried meaning, a part of her that they couldn't let go of. In the months that followed, Sarah's family launched the Pink Ribbon Project in her memory. The initiative focused on supporting pregnant women experiencing domestic abuse Donations poured in, and partnerships were formed with local shelters and women's health organizations. The project held seminars, offered legal aid, and even helped several women relocate to safe housing. It became more than a memorial. It became a lifeline. Meanwhile, Marcus Bell was serving a 12-year sentence under a plea deal. Though his cooperation helped solve the case, many questioned whether his punishment fit the role he played in hiding Sarah's murder. He never showed remorse, only speaking about the case when asked by detectives or lawyers. In prison, he kept to himself, avoiding media attention and interviews. For Sarah's parents, Marcus remained a shadowy figure, someone who hadn't taken her life but had helped erase it. As for Devin Carter, he was transferred to a maximum security facility in northern Florida. There, he lived in near isolation, under protective custody due to threats from other inmates. Reporters requested interviews, but he refused to speak. No apologies, no explanations. He faded into the background, a man now defined solely by the crime he committed. Outside the prison walls, Sarah's story continued to spread. True crime documentaries picked it up. Podcasts aired detailed episodes. One investigative journalist released a multi-part series titled The Baby Girl Who Never Got to Breathe, which explored not only Sarah's murder, but also the warning signs that were missed along the way. Friends who noticed bruises, text messages left unread, and a neighbor who had once heard screaming but hadn't called police. The series sparked a national conversation about recognizing the red flags of emotional and physical abuse during pregnancy. In time, the case became part of training seminars for law enforcement and health professionals. Social workers referenced it when teaching about partner violence. Hospitals added screening questions during prenatal visits. Sarah's name became a lesson in vigilance, awareness, and the cost of silence. But even as her legacy grew, those who loved her still had to live with the silence she left behind. Her best friend, Alicia, visited her grave every month, often leaving fresh flowers and small gifts meant for the daughter Sarah never got to meet. On what would have been her baby shower date, Alicia tied a string of pink balloons to the gravestone and sat beside it in tears, whispering stories she never got to tell. Sarah's story haunted the community in quiet ways. People locked their doors a little earlier. Parents checked in more frequently. Pregnant women in troubled relationships were taken more seriously. And every year on the anniversary of her disappearance, hundreds gathered at the Clearwater waterfront holding candles, each one a flickering promise that her story would never be forgotten. The final chapter of Sarah Mitchell's life ended too soon, but her voice carried far beyond that night. In her absence, she ignited a movement, touched lives, and forced a reckoning with truths many preferred to ignore. Through tragedy, she became a symbol, not of death, but of the strength to protect others from suffering the same fate. And in the end, it wasn't the shocking details or courtroom drama that stayed with people. It was the image of her at that gender reveal party, smiling, radiant, hopeful, holding the secret of her baby girl in pink smoke. A moment of joy, frozen forever, before the darkness closed in. Sarah Mitchell didn't get to raise her child. She didn't get to become a mother. But in her name, hundreds of women found courage, and through them, her voice still echoes.